Hello everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I'm Adrian Lloyd. This is Just My Stupid Opinion. And today is the 14th of April, 2018. Alrighty, so there's been a lot going on over the last week, and probably the biggest story that's been going around has to do with the everything that's been going on in Syria. There was the chemical attack that ended up taking place in Syria in the city of Douma, and that ended up killing 40 people and injured more than 500, I believe, are the last stats that I heard. And this is being blamed as an attack by their president, Bashar al-Assad. Of course, it doesn't make sense that this would be Bashar al-Assad who would gas his own people, because if we were looking at the news that was leading up to this attack that took place before the chemical attack, it was all reports of America getting ready to pull out of Syria, that we've had enough, saying that that America's been in Syria too long and that things are starting to even out. Now it's time to pull out. Now is the time to get out. And then just days later, there's this chemical attack, and it's being blamed on Bashar al-Assad. So why would he do this right as the biggest threat to him, America, is about to pull out of his country? And the answer is, it doesn't. This doesn't benefit al-Assad at all. This would be the dumbest thing he could have done in this situation. This would literally be him sabotaging his own efforts, sabotaging his own war efforts, and undermining his own presidency. This is exactly the sort of thing that this attack would do. However, if we're talking about his opponents, the rebels, well, then this benefits them completely. I mean, why would Bashar al-Assad also launch a chemical attack that was nowhere strategic for his enemies? The rebels were nowhere near there, but it was a populated city. So once again, it doesn't look good for Bashar al-Assad, but it does look good for the rebels. It makes them appear as the good guys, and it makes al-Assad look like the bad guy. So in response to this, just last night, I'll probably be uploading this on Sunday, which is the 15th, so it'll be a couple days since then. But for me, just last night, there was the President Trump ended up sending in fighter jets in order to bomb the city of Damascus. It was either Damascus or just outside of Damascus that they ended up bombing. And this was been extremely unpopular with his base. His base doesn't want this sort of move by Trump. They want to get out of the Middle East. They want to get out of this neocon, war hawkish mindset that seems to dominate the mainstream right now. The mainstream politics, anyway. If we're talking the House of Representatives, Congress, the Senate. So Trump ended up making a statement right after he signed the executive order allowing the jets to make the strike. So as we take a look here, this is what President Trump had to say on the matter.
United States Armed Forces to launch precision strikes on targets associated with the chemical weapons capabilities of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad.
The operation comes in response.
So that's what Trump ended up saying, and then we have a couple of quick videos of the outcome of that. So here we go. This is footage shown of missiles being launched, BBC.
3 missiles, we understand, were fired from a French frigate in the Mediterranean. France also deployed fighter jets to France, taking part in that with British troops and with Americans.
Yeah, so that one had to do with the French, and yeah, if I haven't mentioned already, France and the UK are completely on board with this whole situation. And then here we have another one, which is filmed from the ground, the airstrikes hitting. Along a little bit just to keep once. Yeah. supposed to actually help this situation? Can someone explain this to me? How these airstrikes are actually supposed to stop this, actually supposed to prevent the weapons attack that took place? Because they say that they're bombing areas that were associated with these chemical attacks, but how the hell do they know that for sure? We don't really have great intelligence on the ground, and right now the only people that have really been the ones to tell us about the origins of these chemical attacks have been the White Helmets. Now, I'll admit my ignorance that I don't know too much about the White Helmets, but one second. I'll admit my ignorance with the White Helmets. I don't know too much about them, but I've seen enough to know that they are not the trustworthy group that we believe they are. There's been pictures shown of them associating with members of ISIS, members of Al Qaeda, and not in a way not in the way that they're supposed to be. It's not like after an attack they're trying to dig them out or trying to help them the way the White Helmets say that they supposed to. Not the way the White Helmets are supposed to act, but actually associating with them, shouting Allahu Akbar next to them, standing with them in triumph before. There's been these pictures that have put around. So the White Helmets are not the people that we should be trusting with this information. If we're going to take the White Helmets and take what they have to say at face value, then we're being very ignorant of what's going on in Syria right now. It was also the White Helmets that released the footage of the gas chemicals, the chemical canisters themselves. So here we go. We got one right here, and that was apparently came in through a roof. Yeah, there it is. Came in through this roof right here. Well, off the bat, there's some problems with this image right now. I mean, can someone explain to me why that canister is in such good shape if it's just been dropped from hundreds if not thousands of feet? And let's not forget that when something is in free fall, it picks up a lot of momentum and speed. In fact, one thing they've said is that if you're just going by kinetic energy, you can create almost a nuclear-sized explosion if you drop it from a high enough distance. I know there's a theorized weapon called the Rod from God, and what this is about a telephone sized pole, which I believe would be made out of a very hard metal, like tungsten or something like that. And what it was supposed to do is, from orbit, low orbit, you would just drop it into the atmosphere, and it would have no explosives or anything like that. It would literally just be a giant thing of tungsten, and it would fall to the ground, building up speed because of the kinetic energy. Because I believe, if I'm trying, oh my god, my teachers are going to kill me if I don't remember this, because I believe oh my god, there's an equation with this that I've dealt with before in school, and I can't believe I'm blanking on it, but it's about 9.81 meters per second squared, I believe, is the speed of free fall, and that momentum builds up. So anyway, this Rod from God, it falls all the way hundreds of thousands of feet all the way to the ground, or hell, kilometers, I should say. Tens of thousands of kilometers all the way to the ground. And when it finally impacts the ground, it's built up so much kinetic energy that it won't be a nuclear size explosion, but it can give off a lot of kinetic energy and cause a lot of damage. It's been called the ultimate bunker buster. So why is this canister such in good shape, despite the fact it's fallen from such a large distance? It smashed through this roof that we see here, yet for some reason, gosh damn, it is in such good shape. On top of that, right here, the valve is closed. Why would this chemical canister, which is supposed to release this nerve agent, why would it be closed? That is literally counterproductive to what you're trying to do. So these are just the pictures that have been released, and it's also there have been a couple videos that they've released of these of some of these canisters that been under the attack, that were involved in the attack. But there's something that I don't trust about these pictures and in connection to these white helmets. I don't trust them whatsoever. So what does this mean then? What does this mean for America and the world, really? Because everyone's wondering, is this going to be the start of World War III? You've probably seen it everywhere. It's been online, it's been on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere, even the newspaper, everyone theorizing, is this the beginning of World War III? Probably not. No, I don't believe this is the beginning of World War III. One reason for sure is because after this attack, we had to wait and see what Russia was going to do, because they were threatening repercussions if anything was to happen, if America was to strike Syria, because they are allied with Syria. So what did Russia do? They condemned the attack. Yet everyone was saying that this was going to turn into some sort of shit show, and it still could. But right now, all we have by the Russians is them condemning the attack. Now, this could just be a front, if they've decided that they are going to take some military engagement. This could just be a front to condemn the attack, and then, the rest of the world doesn't really need to worry, and maybe they start building up their defenses, their arms. That's just a possibility. But this would be a very stupid reason to start World War III for both America and Russia. There's stakes being held for both countries in Syria, obviously, and in the area in general, where it's a fight for political influence. It's a proxy war. So if we were to start a massive world war over this, if we were prepared to even go as far as possibly start arming nuclear weapons again, this would not be at the benefit for either country, because neither country is directly in danger from what's going on in Syria, even though, again, we're fighting a proxy war in there, America and Russia. Very similar to what was going on during the Cold War. And yes, we are in sort of a Cold War 2.0 right now. Absolutely, that is no doubt. But no, this will not lead to World War III. This will not lead to some large-scale military engagement that we haven't seen for a long time. We're not going to see any of that. However, this does not help anything. Tensions are still going to be even higher than they are now with Russia. Which I find kind of funny then, because if Trump is supposed to be a Russian puppet, why would he be bumping heads so hard with Putin right now? Because this is not in the benefit of Russia either. So it kind of blows a hole in the narrative of Russia influencing the federal election in order to get Trump in office as some sort of Putin puppet. This really, in my opinion, is just throwing a wrench into the whole idea. So the news is they got to take this one in two ways. See, they're probably going to try and use this as bad publicity for Trump. They're going to say, like, look what he's doing. He's escalating tensions between Russia and the U.S. and just to show that he's being a bad president. However, why would he do this if he was some sort put in by the Russians to begin with? So they're going to have to backtrack on everything they've been talking about for the last year and a half almost about the whole Russian scandal and Russian hacking the federal election, or at least playing a significant role in getting Trump elected into office. But we'll see how the media ends up running with this, because they're not Trump's friend for sure. But anyway, we have to wonder here, what does this mean for Canada? If the UK, if France and the US are going to commit airstrikes in the Middle East, in Syria, and this is going to piss off the Russians, it'll piss off the Iranians, and without a doubt the Syrians, I wonder why, then what does this mean for Canada? What are we going to do about this? Are we going to get pulled into these military engagements? Because Trudeau was the one when he was campaigning And also, he did it when he came in office. It was one of the promises he kept, was he said he was going to take the Canadian CF-18s out of the fight with ISIS, which he did. He took us out of the fight with ISIS, and all that really did was cause a lot of headache for everyone else on the ground, because a lot of the Iraqi allies, the people who were fighting ISIS, they required those CF-18s to give them cover from the air. And one of two things happened. Either it spread the rest of the allies on the ground, such as the U.S. or France or anybody else committing airstrikes in those areas. It spread them even thinner, because they had to cover the areas where Canada's CF-18s used to cover and then were pulled out. Or it meant the Iraqis did not have the air cover that made their lives a hell of a lot easier, and it made their job a lot safer. So it was, in my opinion, I mean, I'm not trying to sound war hawkish, but when we were already engaged in there, I feel that pulling out was just leaving our allies, leaving them high and dry. However, we are not involved in Syria, and I don't want to get involved at all. But that's not the way it looks like politically, because right now Justin Trudeau supports U.S.-led military airstrikes against Assad after alleged Syrian chemical attack. So Justin Trudeau is completely on board with what's happened over the last couple of days. He's completely on board with this, despite the chemical attack. And it's very disturbing when the leaders of your country can't even do the littlest of information checks, or they don't care about the information that's been presented to them, because they must know that Assad was winning. They must know that U.S. was getting ready to pull out, and then Assad just commits a chemical attack. There's no way that the people in charge, our leaders, can actually be sitting there thinking that there's not more to this story, or there's not some bad information that is getting pushed out there. But this is where they're sitting on the subject. They're saying, the Trudeau government is saying that they support these chemical attacks. So when it... excuse me. Hold on, maybe some water will get this phlegm out of my throat. So according to this National Post article, it says, shortly after the strikes, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau issued a statement condemning the use of chemical weapons in eastern Ghouta, where more than 40 people were killed and 500 injured, many of them children, on April 7th. Quote, Canada supports the decision by the United States, the United Kingdom, and France to take action to degrade the Assad regime ability to launch chemical weapons attack against its own people, end quote, Trudeau said. Trudeau went on to promise that Canada would continue to work with our international partners to further investigate the use of chemical weapons in Syria, adding, those responsible must be brought to justice. Absolutely, when we're talking about chemical attacks, it's awful, and I think it was a mix, if I remember hearing correctly. I think they were saying chlorine and sarin gas, and sarin gas is just ugly. It is ugly, ugly, ugly. So sure, we should bring the people responsible to justice. That would be nice. But it'd also be nice if you were focusing on the right people, or at the very least doing a little more background information checks into this situation before deciding who is responsible. All we have really to go by are the white helmets. But that probably doesn't matter much to Justin Trudeau. I don't have the information open right now to show, but Canada is supporting some groups over down in the Middle East right now, and I believe one of them is the white helmets. So it's not like he's really Justin Trudeau or his cabinet or any of his members of parliament are going to really question that information. But I'm surprised. Actually, hold on, before I get into that part. Before I get into the next part, I should finish this up here. So the Prime Minister had previously ruled out any Canadian involvement in a military strike, though a senior government official said Canada, quote, was in the loop, quote, unquote, before the attack against Syria were launched. I'm not sure if this is true, because there's rumors going around right now, as far as I know they're just rumors, that Canada was not in the loop, that they were actually deliberately left out of the loop. And I see no reason why Trump would because I figure it was Trump who was, it was Trump and Theresa May who are really the architects of this going on. I think it was Macron who kind of jumped on. But neither of them really had much of a reason to trust Justin Trudeau. Between his far-left progressive tendencies and just his overall attitude in general to other nations and even towards Canada itself doesn't give them much confidence. And this is actually very reminiscent to how, if we go back to when Pierre Elliott Trudeau was in office, because Nixon had a lot of the same problems with Pierre Elliott Trudeau. He didn't like Trudeau. He didn't like him at all. He thought that there was not something wrong with him. Nixon did think that Trudeau was smart, and Pierre Trudeau was smart. There's no denying that. But he didn't trust him with everything that was going on at the time with the Cold War. And rightfully so. I mean, we knew about, at the time, especially considering the Soviet Union was a communist government, and Trudeau Sr. had a lot of affiliation with not just communism itself, but even communist dictators like Fidel Castro. There was no reason for them to trust him. This is a very similar situation. We know about Trudeau, everyone knows about Trudeau's affiliation with Islamists, and with even radical terrorists. There's been too many, he's met with too many terrorists, or had too many connected to him. Or at least, even if we're not talking about terrorists, we're talking about radical people. Even if they haven't committed any form of actual violence, they still hold radical ideas. We can point to Iqra Khalid as one. And we also have our immigration minister, who is, I cannot remember his name right now. I'll figure that out. Ahmed something. But I do know that both these people... Immigration minister. Both these people, Ahmed Hussein, they come from sketchy pasts. And though most of those have to do with pasts that are connected with more radical Islamist groups. So when we're talking about the Middle East, I don't see why they would trust Trudeau. And especially because he's bitched out of the fight before. Now, again, the difference in that situation is we were already committed to what was going on in Iraq. We're not committed, and I do not want to see us go into this. I hope that America and France and the UK pull out, and this is not going to be anything that is ongoing. But at the very least, considering how these are supposed to be our close allies, to be involved in the planning would be nice. And they say we're in the loop, but again, I do not believe them when they say that. Then we come to our Foreign Affairs Minister, Chrystia Freeland, who says, quote, "When it comes to this issue of chemical weapon, it is clear that the chemical weapons were used and that they were used by the Assad regime," end quote, Freeland said. The minister did not specify what evidence the government has to reach that conclusion, however, saying only that Canada is working with non-government organizations and others to collect evidence of war crimes in Syria. Yeah, this is once again the same problem that Emmanuel Macron did when he came out publicly with the French people, because he says we have, when it comes to it is clear that it was chemical weapons used and that they were used by the Assad regime, but they do not provide any evidence. Macron did the exact same thing. He comes out, he says, France has the evidence to prove that this was a chemical attack by the Assad regime, and because of that, Assad's going to pay for this. And everyone said, okay, Macron, what evidence do you have? Come on, like, don't leave us hanging here. Give us the evidence. And he says, that's the end of the press conference. I don't know if that was actually what happened, but he never ever released any of this evidence that they had that it was actually committed by the Assad regime. Yet they're using this non-existent evidence or evidence that they are only allowed to see to justify them going in and doing attacks on the Middle East. I think that's all I really had for this article. But all in all, the Trudeau government is more than willing to go along with this. They're more than willing to allow these airstrikes go on. Meanwhile, it's probably, once again, they're supporting this, but in the end, it's probably going to be civilians that die. Now, on top of this, not only does it seem that not only does it seem that the Liberals and Justin Trudeau, not just Justin Trudeau's Liberals, but who are okay with this, but it appears that the Conservative Party of Canada is also okay with this. Because Andrew Scheer put out a tweet earlier today. I believe it was today. Yeah, here it is. He said, the chemical attacks in Syria are nothing short of horrific. The brutal civil war in Syria has caused mass suffering on an unimaginable scale. The global community cannot stand idly by while a tyrant uses chemical weapons to kill and maim innocent civilians. The official opposition wholeheartedly supports the United States, the United Kingdom, and France in their effort to hold Assad responsible for his crimes, and to otherwise limit his chemical weapon capabilities. Well, considering how in 2014 we were having reports that there were no more chemical weapons in Syria, then where did they come from? If Assad did not have any chemical weapons, where did they come from? Now, it's possible they got them from one of their allies, Iran, Russia, maybe. It's quite possible. But it doesn't seem very likely. And again, when you weigh the evidence, the fact that Assad was winning, the fact that the U.S. and others were getting ready to pull out, and the fact that he just screwed himself by gassing his own people, it doesn't make sense. Because even if, once again, almost a year after last year's attack, the American government comes out and pretty much states that more or less they weren't sure. At the very best, they weren't sure if it was actually coming from Assad, and at the very worst, the attack never took place. I don't know, I only heard a quick little snippet of that in passing, so take that with a grain of salt. But the point is, when we're talking about our government, the Conservative Party is siding with Justin Trudeau. That doesn't sit well with me. We should side with Justin Trudeau on almost nothing. Now, there's a few things that, of course, just people in general, regardless of the side of the aisle, can agree on. But this is another good... But this is showing bipartisanship, and it gets me nervous when both sides of the aisle are willing to work together on something like this. It really does. Both sides of the aisle almost never agree on anything. So when they do come to a decision together, and there's not really the official opposition is going along, there's not even been a time in Parliament yet for them to discuss this. It's not like they've had a sit down right now because Parliament is still out until Monday. We don't have a next sitting of Parliament. We haven't had a sitting in Parliament since Easter all the way until the 16th. This Monday is going to be the first sitting, so they haven't even discussed this, and the opposition has already made the decision that they support this wholeheartedly. So I kind of lost it on Andrew Scheer when that happened. I ended up tweeting to him and said, come on, Scheer, are you an idiot? Why would Assad use these weapons right when he was winning? Don't go war hawkish neocon on us. If you are trusting the White Helmets, then you have made a grave mistake. Al-Qaeda 2.0. Don't you dare risk Canadian lives over this. Justin Trudeau agrees with UK, US, France. So that should be your sign to go the opposite way. But that wouldn't fuel the war machine, eh? And a lot of other people weren't very happy about this either. Actually, I like this one right here. The shut the fuck up, neocons. The guy shoots lasers out of his eyes. That's a good picture. I think the thing that bugs me the most about showing bipartisanship, especially under a Trudeau government, is that means there is nobody criticizing the Trudeau government. And the Trudeau government always needs criticism. It always does. But at the moment, the opposition is going along with them. And because of that, I get the feeling that they're willing to overlook a lot of things that Trudeau would do. A lot of things that he'd be willing to do in this situation. I mean, perhaps if he was willing to commit Canadian troops, then we wouldn't get much of a... maybe the opposition wouldn't wouldn't criticize him much. Now, I think if Trudeau wanted to commit troops, there would be some criticism, there would be some questioning in Parliament. But all in all, it makes me nervous that Andrew Scheer is just going to side with Justin Trudeau. I mean, we can all condemn the chemical attacks and the death that happened, but it shouldn't be controversial to then say, well, we need to look into it a little more. We need to be certain. Because the White Helmets, too, are not a government organization. So, we're trusting them with decisions. We're trusting their information for our decision for international politics. We're trusting them, their information, with whether we should commit to a war zone or not. And I don't just mean we as in Canadians, but just in general for the Americans, the British and the French. We're taking that information and we're running with it. And I actually think this is a very bad move on Trump, because he's been pissing off the base a little bit lately. Actually, more than a little bit. A lot of people were not happy with Trump when he ended up saying, he was talking about, I think it was after Parkland. I think it was soon after Parkland when he talked about taking away the guns and then worrying about due process after. A lot of people didn't like that. Then along comes last month, the omnibus. And there was a lot of crap in that people didn't like. And Trump even said, I'm not going to sign it. I'm not going to sign it. And then last minute, he signs it and then says, well, it's going to be the last one. But he was telling his base, I'm not going to sign it. You know, we already did this before. And we've already been here before with the Democrats shoving down a spending bill down our throats we don't like. Not to mention that omnibus was some 2,000 pages long, and they only had some 24 hours to read everything. Good luck with that. Nobody's going to read that. That's a goddamn... That is, what, 3 Harry Potter novels put into one, maybe? That's ridiculous. But Trump signed it, and that pissed off his base. And the base was willing to forgive him last year when he made the strikes in Syria, when he dropped the mother of all bombs. Despite that, and people didn't like that, they were willing to forgive him. I think he's doing it. I think he's really screwing himself over now, because what has Trump done lately that his base can support? 2018 has not been a good year so far for Trump. So I don't think that he's going to find the forgiveness from his base that he has before. I think for a lot of people that they are going to turn on Trump and think him as more of a establishment member or a neocon, or unless that he's been, at the very least that he's been altered. He's been, not corrupted, I want to say, by these people, but Trump will always have those people who will support him no matter what. They can do no wrong in Trump's eyes. But a lot of the people, even if they are on the more pro-Trump train, they're going to criticize him, and they're going to stray from him if he doesn't do what they want. If he's not staying true to his message, if he's not sticking with the populist platform, if he's going more for an establishment platform such as international war, then people will abandon his base. His base is going to abandon him. And this is not what he needs with the midterm elections coming up. Granted, the Democrats more than once have shot themselves in the foot, but if Trump is not living up to what he says, if Trump is not living up to his campaign promises, then it's very likely that people will flip, because there's not people who are so hardcore one side or the other, but they just want a government that'll do whatever it happens to be, cut taxes, or I guess I can't really talk about the Democrats and cutting taxes, but they'll go to another. If the Democrats are the only other political party, many people will jump between the two. It's sort of those centrists who will always who will always kind of flip-flop back and forth. So if Trump does not get his game together, if Trump does not now, he needs to do this now, damage control, and start returning to the platform that got him elected, he's going to have a rough run in November 2018 when the midterm election's coming around. He may lose the House or the Senate. I don't know which one's actually more at risk right now at being lost, but it's a possibility that could change. And then what's supposed to happen if the Democrats regain control? If, let's say that through this the Democrats regain the House and the Senate, and then come 2020, Trump is voted out of office, let's just say, and the Democrats regain full control of America, what the hell do you think they're going to do? They are not going to be happy because of Trump. So I think we're going to see some sort of blue wave vengeance where they're going to go against everything that Republicans hold dear. They'll probably attack their freedom of speech. They'll probably attack their guns. Trump needs to get his act together right now and return to his original platform. But the problem is that as so many people have come and gone in his cabinet, I feel like he's now getting down to the remnants of the people who are willing to join his cabinet and work with him. And because of that, he doesn't have many options in terms of quote-unquote draining the swamp. And because of that, he's bringing in establishment politicians. He's bringing in people such as, what's his name? Bolton. John Bolton, that's it. That was his name, John Bolton, who is now become the National Security Advisor for the United States. Many people took notice that everything that's been going on, like Trump deciding to hit Syria, happened within Bolton's first week. Now, of course, all this took place within Bolton's first week, but Bolton also has a history of war hawkiness. So a lot of people are not trusting of him. A lot of people believe that as Trump brings in more people like Bolton, he is actually getting more influenced by them. So I think somebody needs to have a talk with Trump, or Trump is in real danger of losing all the support, and not all of it, but he's in danger of losing a lot of his support that he's gained throughout the last few years. So, we all remember not just a couple weeks ago that there was the tragedy of the Humboldt bus crash. That was really sad. That was really sad. And for anybody who doesn't know, there was, in Saskatchewan, there was a team of junior hockey players that were traveling to compete in, I believe it was the playoff semifinals. It could have been a tournament semifinals, but I believe it was playoffs right now, actually. Yeah, it's April. It's about playoff time. So they were traveling, and as they were traveling to go meet their rivals, they ended up getting hit by a semi-trailer, and the bus ended up falling over. 14 people died off the start. That was our first numbers that came in, and since then a couple more have died in hospital. So it brings the total number dead to 16 from this bus crash. That was tragic. I knew that me and my wife were quite sad to hear that. Just so many young lives cut short. I mean, these were, I don't even know exactly how old they were, but these were underage, man. These were kids. Nobody could say anything bad about these kids or about this bus crash, right? Nobody asked for this. No, they did. These kids didn't have it coming. They were just trying to go and have a good time and wanted to win their semi-playoff game. There's not a thing anybody could say about these kids, right? Wrong. Perhaps by now you've heard of it. I wanted to actually do a video on this the day I came across it, which I guess was about 4 days ago now. Although I was busy week for school, so I didn't get the chance to do it. But it was this woman, Nora Loreto. She is a disgusting human being, because when it showed that the GoFundMe page for the families of the victims bus crash had surpassed $4 million, and this is actually one of the most successful GoFundMe campaigns ever. Not the most, I don't think, but it was one up there. I think within like the top 10, one of the most successful campaigns ever run on GoFundMe. So what does this woman, Nora Loretto, have a problem with? Well, she mentions it's a lot of money, but then she goes on to say, I'm trying to not get cynical about what is a totally devastating tragedy, but the maleness, the youthfulness, and the whiteness of the victims are, of course, playing a significant role. Well, what a fucking thing to say about 16 people who were killed. And one of them did end up being a woman. A woman did get killed in this. But her biggest problem is how they're white and male. And that's why they're getting so much attention for this. This is a disgusting thing to say. This is a garbage human being right here, this Nora Loretto. Nora Loretto is a garbage human. This tragedy is considered a tragedy because 14 kids, and then the other two who died were adults who are members of the coaching staff. They're kids. These are kids, underage kids, still going to school, not doing anything besides traveling to go play hockey. And this woman has a problem that this is making national headlines with all these deaths. But of course, they're so privileged because they got to play hockey. And you know, hockey equipment is expensive. So because of that, these people are so fucking privileged. And she's actually suggesting that that this would not have made headlines if this had been, say, a basketball team full of black people or Asian people or any of them. If this had been a group of them, this never would have made headlines. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. When 14 kids die in a tragic accident, it doesn't matter what their race is. It does not matter. But this is the problem with people like her, this woman, Nora Loretto. And we can even take a look at who are the sort of people that follow her. Nikki Ashton. Oh, God. Oh, my freaking God. The intersectional environmental feminist. The self-proclaimed intersectional environmental feminist. Oh, Jesus. Caroline Bennett, who currently sits, I believe, as the Liberal MP for Northern Indigenous Affairs, if I remember correctly. Northern Affairs, yeah. She's Minister for Crown, Indigenous Relations, and Northern Affairs. Yeah. Part of Justin Trudeau's cabinet, so once again, I'm not going to put anything in that. Oh, the NDP, the official NDP party, watch it. It follows her. And of course, National Post and Maclean's. They follow her too. And that's actually because I believe she is a reporter. I believe she is a reporter for Maclean's magazine. And this is the problem, too, if she is a reporter for Maclean's magazine. The problem is that these are the actual people controlling the information system. And she's actually trying to suggest that a tragedy is not a tragedy simply because they were born white and male. I honestly don't know how she looked up that story. Like, she was on Twitter. She saw that come through. And instead of thinking, that's good, the families, at least, are getting something for the loss of their children, like that people were willing to step up and were willing to actually donate their money to them so that these families could at least be financially secure in giving their kids a funeral and be financially secure after the fact. Just trying to do something nice for these families. But instead of looking at it that way, instead of looking at it from that perspective, she comes in actually believing that instead that this shouldn't be a national headline story, or the only fact it is because of those reasons. I don't know how these people go through their life thinking that way. I don't know how they can actually be happy, good people, good-hearted individuals if that's their thought process. It's absolutely disgusting. Unbelievable. And then final story for the day, and then we'll end this off, is the Liberals do not understand Doug Ford at all, and they are coming about this all the wrong way. And right now we're talking provincial politics, so we're talking about the Ontario Liberals and the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party. So the Liberals, their campaign strategy throughout this whole thing is they're going to attack Doug Ford's character. They're going to attack the man himself, his history, blah, 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 blah. And we're going to show people the true Doug Ford that they don't really know about. Not the Doug Ford that speaks in public, but the one behind the scenes that nobody knows about. Is there a behind the scenes Doug Ford? Is there? Because because one of the things that, like, we already know Doug Ford. Like, they're trying to come out and say that, like, they're going to say, like, well, he's, in public he tries to hold himself as very respectable. Behind the scenes, he's a disgusting human being. We already know what Doug Ford's like. This is not going to work. None of this is going to work. But first, let's get into this video here, what they had to say. I forget. What is this MP's name? I cannot remember her name. Deb Matthews, Liberal campaign co-chair, and she says on Doug Ford,
I think people don't understand the real Doug Ford. What evidence do you have that people don't know who Doug Ford is?
Well, so we've done research on this, and I've done lots of door knocking, and outside of the GTA particularly, but within the GTA as well. We've done focus groups, we've done research, and people have an impression of him, and when they see the ads and when they actually learn what he's actually said in his own words, their impression of him changes 180 degrees very, very quickly.
What do you think?
Oop, did not mean to do that again. But yes, they've been speaking to people, tell them about the true Doug Ford, and then their opinion changes completely. So who are you going to? People who voted Liberal? Is that who you're going to? Especially because they're talking about, well, we talked to people, like they said, outside the GTA, the Grand Toronto area, or Greater Toronto area, whichever one you prefer. So, but they also said inside the GTA, so outside and inside. But from what I can tell from the way that they're speaking, the words they're using, more or less, they are talking about, they're talking about right around Toronto. So they're talking about right around Toronto, just outside of Toronto. Well, right now, as it stands in the GTA, it's very red down there. That's where the majority of the Liberal votes have actually come from.
There's the Doug Ford.
Sorry about that. We will get to that in just a second. I just had to pull up a video that I also wanted to show. So they're probably, first off, they're not just going house to house, or if they are, they're in specific areas, probably Liberal ridings. They're going to their Liberal ridings, and then they're talking to their constituents, and they're like, well, this is the real Doug Ford. Like, we had no idea this was the real Doug Ford. These are the people who are already going to vote Liberal, because the people have already made up their mind about Doug Ford. Doug Ford has been very public in the past, especially when everything went down with Rob Ford. And this is something that they can't help but keep bringing back to. Rob Ford. Well, Doug Ford is not Rob Ford. They are different people. And you know what? Actually, I wondered too, because I was still more liberal when everything was going down with Doug Ford. So when everything with the crack came out, and then after that was all said and done, and then he was campaigning again to be mayor of Toronto, and he was actually gaining a lot of support. People were actually going to probably vote him in again until he got the cancer and ended up dropping out. And I was confused at the time. I didn't understand why were people voting for Rob Ford when we knew everything about him. But I get it now that I'm a little bit older. And one of the reasons is that, well, first off, Rob Ford did do actually a lot of good things for the people of Toronto. People want results. So if you're going to deliver results, it doesn't matter too much what your character is in the end of the day. I mean, Trump's overall attitude should have brought him down, but he looked like a guy who was coming in to make results, and that's why people were willing to forgive him on certain things. And of course, other things were blown out of proportion. But overall, his overall demeanor for a politician was completely the opposite. We already know Doug Ford's past. So for the Liberals to campaign on "you don't know the real Doug Ford" is not going to work. In fact, it's just them once again shooting themselves in the foot. I already know who Doug Ford is. I knew who he was as soon as the day he put in his candidacy for the leadership of the PC party. I already knew about him. I knew what his past was. But I also saw a very similar situation in Ontario that was going on in America in 2015, 2016, which was a lot of people were disillusioned with the government that was in place. And here was coming a guy who was not your standard politician, even though the Fords do have a bit of a history. Doug Ford's father was a politician, Rob Ford was a politician, Doug Ford's a politician. They have a history, but it's not the same type of history as many of these other politicians, and they never acted like real politicians. It's a shakeup. This is what we're going for. We're going for a shakeup. And the best part about this shakeup is that Doug Ford is actually going to do what we want. We want to lower our taxes. We do feel that the debt has gotten out of control. Doug Ford took a populist platform because he knew that nobody else was listening to the populist platform, and that's why he's going to win. Because he's listening to what people are saying they want, and he says, okay, I'm going to do it. And even if this is just his strategy to get in, he's going to have to stick to this strategy in order to keep the base, in order to stay in power. So I actually have a lot of confidence that Doug Ford is going to come in and do what he says he wants to do. Now, he hasn't given out a detailed platform about him being premier. I'm okay with that, actually, and I'm actually a stickler for platforms. That was one of my big things back when Trump was running, is he didn't have much of a platform, and I was a stickler for platforms at the time. I want to know what you wanted to do. But Doug Ford has told me enough of what he wants to do to gain my support. He wants to cut my taxes. Okay. He wants to make it easier for me to get a job, and he wants to make it easier for businesses to run in order to be able to pay me better wages to work. Okay. Now, again, I can't guarantee that the business is going to pay me a better wage just because Doug Ford makes it easier for them to do business in Ontario. But it's a much better opportunity than what have available me under Kathleen Wynne. Right now, all the job opportunities are just drying up. They're disappearing. And what's left is part-time work at shitty employments right now. The job market sucks. I mean, you need now to give, like, personality tests if you're applying at, like, Home Depot or Walmart. These basic jobs now require, like, 40-question personality tests. What the fuck? But anyway, getting a little bit back more on topic. This is not going to work because most people already know this, and you're not going to persuade enough people. And one of their main problems with the Liberals is the fact that people feel that all they've done is drove us to bankruptcy, and they've made life harder. So instead of addressing those issues and trying to say how they're going to rectify them in the upcoming 4 years should they win, instead they're going to try and just make a campaign based on how bad Doug Ford is. Well, this is not going to work. You're going to crash and burn. And actually, the Liberal Party released a campaign ad, an election ad, attack ad, there we go, an attack ad against Doug Ford early. So why don't we go take a look at that?
Or do you think you know? And
there we go. 1 second.
Then there's the real Doug Ford. There's the Doug Ford you think you know. And then there's the real Doug Ford, who'll give corporations huge tax cuts, but take the minimum wage raise right out of hardworking people's pockets. Who'll fire 40,000 people, including teachers and nurses, put restrictions on a woman's right to decide her own pregnancy, and won't make big business pay a cent to address climate change. The real Doug Ford. He'd be comfortable living in that kind of Ontario. Would you?
Okay, never mind. You got my vote. Liberal Party all the way. There was so much wrong with that ad. It is unbelievable. Let's go back and go through that bit by bit. So let's start with the Doug Ford you think you know.
There's the Doug Ford you think you know, and then there's the real Doug Ford.
Once again, I know pretty much all of Doug Ford's history, and I know how he acts both on stage and off stage. I don't really think that the Liberal Party have more insight than the common people, because they had his entire family under a microscope for months just a few years ago. So once again, you're already not off to a great start, but let's continue.
Who'll give corporations huge tax cuts, but take the minimum wage raise right out of hardworking people's pockets.
Well, the minimum wage, first of all, okay, well, he talked about these tax cuts to businesses. Yeah, he does want to give the tax cut to businesses because currently all the taxing on businesses is what's driving them away. If it's not driving them to different provinces, it's driving them out of country to America. And actually, that is more likely where most of these companies are going, is America, to get out of just Canada's tax on business altogether. Now, I'm not saying there shouldn't be a tax on business. I think there should be a tax on business, absolutely. But if you're just going to tax the hell out of the private corporations, the private businesses, then you're just going to drive them off. And you need the private industry to prop up the public industry. So Kathleen Wynne wants to give away all this free shit. But she wants to give all this free shit away now. But how is she going to do that when there's no businesses paying taxes in order for her to fund that? The only way she can go and fund any of those would be to tax the people even more. And that's what keeps happening. They tax the businesses. We can't tax the businesses anymore right now. We'll tax the people more. We'll tax the people more. We can't tax the people anymore. We'll tax the businesses. It's an ongoing cycle. And the minimum wage has destroyed opportunity in Ontario. It has destroyed job opportunities. I don't know if anybody there's another YouTube channel dealing in Canadian politics called the Arana Nation. And the guy who runs the Arana Nation, and yeah, you just punch in on the YouTube search, Arana Nation, A-R-A-N-A, then you will find him. And this guy goes on to say about how he actually is getting paid less now after the minimum wage hike. And why? He was working for the same job. He actually had to quit, he said, because they couldn't maintain his hours. That was the problem. He was working consistent hours up until the minimum wage hike. And then they cut his hours. He was working half the hours he was before. And then suddenly he's down to like one shift a week, and it's just not enough to survive. But it was because the business couldn't pay him anymore. And he didn't fault his company at all. Even though he liked it and he was forced to quit, he said, apparently, he told everybody on the video, he said that he told his business that he doesn't fault them for this, because he understands that they can't afford to keep him on working as much as they can after the minimum wage hike. And then there's the most obvious things, that you raise minimum wage so businesses need to pay each employee more. And then in order to be able to afford to pay each employee more and make a profit, they end up shit, I just lost this. I'm bad for that. I'm really bad for that. They end up raising their prices. There we go. They end up raising their prices, which just costs everybody more, which means that minimum wage hike is pretty much nullified. But let's move on.
Who'll fire 40,000 people, including teachers and nurses.
He has never, ever, ever said anything of the sort. Not once. This is Liberal Party propaganda, because Doug Ford has talked about how he'll make cuts to the public sector in order to find, because right now, as the budget stands, they need $4 billion in order to balance the budget. That there was a lot that Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals were going to finance through the carbon tax. And Doug Ford wants to scrap the carbon tax. So where's he supposed to find this other $4 billion? And as he stated, he's like, hey, once we get into the books, we'll find plenty of stuff to cut in there that is just meaningless money being thrown around. Absolutely, especially after the release of that Sunshine List, which detailed all the workers in Ontario that make over $100,000, the public sector employees. There's absolutely money to be cut, and he could cut a large portion of that if he got in. And he's even talked about before about how he's made these cuts in these cuts in Toronto with pretty much not sacrificing much in the public sector. And he has told before that he has a lot of respect for doctors, and I'm pretty sure he said the same for teachers. He doesn't want to make these cuts there. He wants to find where reckless money is being spent. He doesn't want to cut doctors' jobs. He doesn't want to cut teachers' jobs. He wants to, what he wants to do is cut anywhere, any public spending that is unnecessary. But why would the first thing he jumps to would be doctors and teachers? Things he would know that people need. He knows that wait times in hospitals are a problem, so why would he cut medical staff such as nurses and doctors? He also knows that schools are a fucking joke right now, so why would he cut the teachers? That's the last thing we need. He knows one of the problems is actually that there are very few teachers right now. If anything, the amount of doctors, the amount of teachers, like how short it is, this is the result of Kathleen Wynne's policies. But they are now trying to turn that and say that he is the one that's going to be responsible for cutting that. This is propaganda, pure and simple. And no point has Doug Ford said he was going to cut these jobs from them. But the liberals were the ones who said he is going to cut doctors and teaching positions. Bullshit.
Restrictions on a woman's right to decide her own pregnancy.
Once again, bullshit. Because all Doug Ford said on the matter when he's talking about abortions is he doesn't think that a woman, an underage girl, should be able to go out and get an abortion without her parents knowing, because this is already what happens. And plenty of abortion doctors are willing to do this. Perform an abortion on an underage girl and never inform her parents that she was there, that she got an abortion. Are you kidding me? I mean, how many things do kids need parental consent on? Jesus, I remember being like 14 or something, and I wanted the video game 300 for my PSP. It was just like from the movie. It was like a game from the movie that they made for the PSP, and I don't know if they made it on any other systems, but it was an 18-plus game, and I had to take my dad in to go buy 300. And you know, it was just a regular hacker and slasher game, but it actually, honestly, if I look at it now, I'm thinking, I don't even think that should have been an 18-plus game. But it was, and I couldn't afford it. I could afford it. I had to have parental consent, so my dad had to go with me and be next to me as I bought it. Now, in a similar situation, a young girl will need her parent, her father or her mother there in order to go buy a video game like that, which once again, when I look back on it, it's not even remotely close to as bad as some video games out there. Not even close. Even though it was a hacker and slasher, it was just kind of crappy animation, not overly... Even though the movie was very emphasizing the blood and everything like that, it was not over the top, the blood in this stuff or anything like that. But she needs parental consent to go buy a game like that, but she can walk into an abortion clinic and have an abortion, no problem. That's what Doug Ford wants to change. And I've already seen this. When I've been talking to certain people in public about Doug Ford and what's going on in the provincial election, some of them have actually fully told me that they will not support Doug Ford because he wants to take away abortion rights from girls, from women. Not at all. And besides, right now, there are no laws surrounding abortion in Canada. Nada. Not one. Which means 3 days before a woman gives birth, if she wants to go in and have that baby literally torn apart, because at that point it's a full baby and that's what they have to do, rip it off limb by limb and suck it out. Like, that is what we're talking about, a late-term abortion. That's what a late-term abortion is. They can do that. When is it considered a life? Jesus Christ. It's got to be considered a life at some point. At some point. So once again, liberal propaganda. Moving on.
And won't make big business pay a cent to address climate change.
Once again, talking about the carbon tax when they say that. But in fact, the carbon tax doesn't improve anything. It doesn't solve anything. And it's just money coming out of our pockets. Something that most of Ontario is not happy about, something that Kathleen Wynne was totally okay at putting every single Ontarian on and be forced them to pay for this carbon tax, something that Patrick Brown supported. But Doug Ford comes in, makes the popular decision of people in Ontario don't want the carbon tax because they feel that it's money out of their pocket and One of the main reasons, too, is because people don't think that it does anything. Even more liberal voting people. I remember even when I was more on the left, and people that I spoke to at the time who were on the left, a lot of them were against the carbon tax. They found it was just a tax on top of a tax. And that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. It doesn't stem greenhouse emissions. It's just us paying more money. It's the people paying more money for the government to virtue signal and feel better about themselves as if they're actually doing something. And Catherine McKenna has also said that Catherine McKenna has also pretty much said she doesn't have time for anybody questioning climate change or anything like that. So the Liberal Party, they do not listen to us Canadians because we come in with legitimate concerns such as, well, we don't feel that this is going to solve anything and it's more money out of our pockets. And they're concerned, and then they come back with, well, you guys just are climate denialists. Okay. Okay, then. But but anyway, this campaign ad that they're trying to run against Doug Ford it's just a garbage campaign, and it's just a desperate attempt by Kathleen Wynne, a desperate attempt to gain back as much support as possible. And she's not gaining it back through merit. She's not gaining it back by saying, I'm going to change the way I conduct myself. She is doing it because she is trying to turn Ford into a boogeyman. She already knows that she's the boogeyman. Her cabinet knows that she's the boogeyman. But they are trying to pass that off as Doug Ford. They are trying to divide people and scare people to get them to vote for the Liberals again. That's what they are trying to do with their campaign against Doug Ford. But it's not going to work. Too many people are now on to Kathleen Wynne's bullshit. Too many people see how her policies have actually hurt Canada. It is not have hurt, not helped Canada. So go ahead, Kathleen Wynne, run your attack ads. Say whatever you want in them. I hope it makes you feel better. I hope it helps you sleep at night until the June 7th election. Because come June 7th, you're done. Come June 7th, there's going to be a new sheriff in town, and they're going to change around everything that's going on. Now, let's not get into, when we're talking about Ford, though, let's not get into a cult of personality situation. Because that is some of the problem that is happening with Ford right now, is the fact that he is, Trump, is that there are many people who have a cult of personality around him, and because of that, he cannot do any wrong. I think that that the Ford Nation base should be ready to criticize Doug Ford for good reasons. We need to criticize him because, first off, we need to jump on that before the opposition does. We need to own up to that shit first to take away any sort of fuel from the opposition if anything bad does take place under Ford's watch, which it will. There's always going to be bad things that come underneath a leader's watch, and it's almost unavoidable. Things we're not going to like. When it's my friends and people I like, I criticize them because I want them to do better. I criticize them because I want them to be aware of certain things that they're doing or how they're acting before somebody else is going to come along and weaponize that against them. And that's what I want people to do for me too. I do like when people are willing to speak up and say something about that, whether I do on here, let's say, that they don't like, because that way I know what to do differently. I know that if I'm saying something that is wrong, if I'm saying something that is fake news, I need someone to come on and say, you're spreading fake news. Because if I ever get caught doing that by the opposition, that's going to be something they can use against me. And again, if somebody points out that I'm spreading fake news, for instance, I can come on and correct myself before that gets out. So that if anybody on the opposition wants to come back and criticize me for it, I can point out and say, I've already recognized that and I've already put that out publicly. I do have a couple videos out, just correction number 1 and correction number 2, where I've made mistakes. And that's one of the main reasons that I've done that. So let's not build a cult of personality around Ford. Let's support the man, but let's be ready to criticize him when he does wrong. Because the other thing is, too, is I suppose that when we're talking about everything that's going on with Trump in Syria right now and the omnibus and everything like that, one of the problems is that he still has a large base support that is still supporting him regardless. So even if he's doing something they don't like, if Trump is just seeing these people that are supporting him regardless, he thinks he's doing something that's right, that his base likes, even if a lot of people don't like it. And he may see some of the criticism and think these are just the outliers. But if we go do a universal criticism, then we let our leader know. The leader that we like, we let him know that we are not happy. And that way they can actually fix their problems before it gets out of hand. If Doug Ford is straying from his promises, we need to criticize him so that way he gets back on track. But going after the man's character is a terrible, terrible idea from the liberals, but I encourage it. I encourage it. Bring it on. Bring it on, because you are not helping yourself. If anything, you are only digging yourself a deeper grave, and I'm okay with that. I am okay if the liberals want to dig themselves into a very, very, very deep grave. Thank you all for joining me on the podcast today. I'm Adrian Lloyd. This is Just My Stupid Opinion. I'll see you guys all soon.